Pope Francis, renowned for his progressive views and compassionate leadership since becoming the head of the Catholic Church in 2013, has recently sparked discussions across religious communities with his revolutionary insights on Jesus' life and teachings. In a series of powerful sermons and speeches, he shared revelations about the very true nature of Jesus' death that have left even devout believers questioning long-held beliefs. This video dives into Pope Francis's transformative perspectives, his calls for empathy and inclusivity, and the controversies stirred by his interpretation of Christianity in the modern world. We are followers of Jesus Christ, and his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure, the failure of the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? It is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Pope Francis has just dropped a bombshell, shaking the foundations of Christian belief as we've known it for years. Pope Francis, the 266th and current Pope of the Catholic Church, has been turning heads since his tenure began in 2013. Known for his impactful views on Christianity and being a preacher of compassion and love, he's been a breath of fresh air in the often traditional Vatican. But his most recent revelation has left even the most devout followers completely shocked. In a series of recent speeches and sermons, Pope Francis has been talking about what he calls the true nature of Jesus' death. And you know what? It's not what we've been told. In this video, we address this recent revelation and what the Pope has to share with the whole world. Pope Francis addressed people on Easter to share his feelings and opinions on specific topics. As you know, Easter Sunday is a special day for Christians because they believe it's when Jesus came back to life after dying on the cross. While addressing them, Pope Francis talked about how God is always with us, but he also said some surprising things about Jesus. What's not surprising is that this wasn't the first time he said something that didn't quite sit well with the public. He is quite notorious for often saying things that make traditional Catholics uncomfortable, but this time, even his supporters, Orthodox Catholics, and critics were taken aback by what he said. He boldly made some revelations about Jesus' death that no one knew about or had ever heard before. It made many people question what they've always believed about Jesus. Before we get into all of that, first, we need to look at how Pope Francis leads the Catholic Church. I have to tell you that he leads it in a very unusual way. From growing up in Buenos Aires to becoming a world-renowned priest, Pope Francis was known for his simple way of life and care for the poor and marginalized. Instead of living in the fancy apostolic palace like previous popes, Pope Francis chose to live in the much simpler Vatican guest house. He also dressed very modestly, showing that he didn't want a lot of wealth and luxury. During his time as Pope, Pope Francis talked about important values like kindness, including everyone, and protecting the environment. He believed that the Church should welcome everyone, no matter where they come from or what their situation is. Pope Francis even tried to connect with people from other religions, not just Catholics, to help everyone understand each other better. For a religion that some think of as only for certain people, Pope Francis's way of accepting everyone was controversial to some more traditional Catholics. Pope Francis tried hard to keep the crucial beliefs of the Church, while also making changes to fit the modern world better. He cared a lot about helping people who didn't have much and spoke up for them. Pope Francis once said that some of the happiest people are those who don't have much. But his new ways of looking at things also caused some arguments about whether the Church should stick to its old beliefs or change to fit in with the world today. While many people liked Pope Francis's changes to the Catholic Church, not everyone was happy with his new ideas about the Bible and Jesus. Some people committed to the old Catholic beliefs didn't like the changes. But it seems like some of the arguments have calmed down after his latest talk about Jesus. Before we talk about the teachings that seem to calm things down in the Catholic Church, let's understand why there's been some controversy around Pope Francis, his teachings, and his way of leading. Trying to keep the important beliefs of the Catholic Church while also making old teachings fit in with modern life has been a big challenge for Pope Francis. Instead of only following the exact words written down, Pope Francis wants Catholics to think deeper about the stories in the Bible. He says these stories have deeper meanings that can teach us valuable things about life today. For example, Pope Francis says, "The story of how the world was created in the book of Genesis is not just about how things began." He thinks it's a powerful story that teaches us about our special connection with God and our responsibility to care for the earth. Looking at the Bible this way makes its teachings more meaningful for our lives now. But not everyone agrees with Pope Francis. Some people called conservatives think the Bible should be understood exactly as it's written, without thinking about its deeper meanings. They worry that looking deeper into the Bible stories might change the fundamental beliefs of the Church. On the other hand, people who support Pope Francis think that understanding the deeper meanings of the Bible stories can make its teachings even better and more relevant for today's world. Before we proceed, you need to know some of the Pope's most controversial interpretations of the Bible. Some of them will shock you. What are the Pope's most controversial teachings that have actually divided the Catholic Church? The Pope is known for saying things that make people talk. Some of his statements are quite all right in the Christian faith, but some cause big discussions and make people question his faith and, weirdly, whether he'll go to heaven. Recently, the Pope said something specific for LGBTQ Catholics. It's the first time there's been any talk about blessing same-sex couples. Catholic priests can now bless same-sex couples. Pope Francis formally changed Vatican policy today, which, knowing the common religious aversion to the topic, is a huge deal. Some people even want to remove him from being the Pope because of this. To understand why, let's look at some of the things he said. Some years ago, there were reports that Pope Francis said something strange. He reportedly said that humans could disappear and God would make new species. This came from an interview in an Italian newspaper with a friend of the Pope, Eugenio Scalfari, who is an atheist. In another interview, Scalfari reminded the Pope about this and asked about what happens to bad people who go to hell. He wondered if their souls would suffer forever. In response, Pope Francis reportedly said that people who feel sorry for what they did and ask God for forgiveness won't be punished. Instead, they'll be forgiven and can be with God. But those who don't feel sorry and can't be forgiven will stop existing. According to the Pope, he doesn't believe in hell. Instead, he thinks that souls who do bad things just disappear. After this interview, the Vatican quickly said that what Scalfari wrote wasn't exactly what the Pope said. They said the words weren't written down right, so we shouldn't consider them exactly what the Pope thinks. Even though the Vatican said this, there was still some arguing about the interview. First, they put it in their newspaper and website, then took it off, and then put it back again before finally taking it off for good. This, of course, caused a lot of confusion. Some people connected what Scalfari wrote to something the Pope wrote in a book called Amoris Laetitia. In that book, the Pope said nobody should be punished forever, because that's not what the Bible says. This made some people think that maybe the Pope has different ideas about hell. In another interview in 2015, Pope Francis seemed to say that even though nobody goes to hell forever, people who don't want to be with God might just stop existing after they die. So, even though the Vatican said Scalfari got it wrong, there's still some confusion about what the Pope really thinks about hell. That's not all. Pope Francis has also said things that seem different from what the Church has always taught about the world's top problems. In 2013, Pope Francis did another interview where he said the biggest issues in the world right now are young people not having jobs and older people feeling lonely. You wouldn't expect the Pope to say these are the most severe problems. Then he reportedly said that trying to make people become Catholics doesn't make sense and is silly. This goes against what the Bible says about telling everyone about Jesus. Even more surprising, the Pope allegedly said that there is no particular Catholic God, only God. This seems to go against the idea that Catholicism is the only true religion. Many Catholics were confused and upset by what the Pope reportedly said. Maybe the Pope didn't fully believe in some of the major parts of Catholicism. Some people thought perhaps he has a different, more general view of spirituality that isn't strictly Catholic. And if that's true, not many will be surprised. Continuing with his beliefs, the Pope received more criticism in 2016. Now remember, he always says that abortion is very wrong, but his focus on being kind and forgiving has caused arguments. In 2016, during the Special Mercy Year, the Pope said that priests could forgive women who had abortions, making another dent in his progressive image. The Pope went off script in his weekly address to the faithful gathered on St. Peter's Square to deliver his strongest criticism yet of abortion. Some people liked this idea, but others didn't. Now let's discuss what the Pope thinks about money and how the world works. He didn't hold back when talking about capitalism. He said it's not suitable for poor people. He even said caring too much about money, cars, and phones takes people away from God. He said the world needs to be more fair for everyone, with rich and poor people having more equal lives. These words made people who care about fairness very happy. But some, said the Pope, shouldn't talk about how countries and their economies work. The Pope thinks about the world as one big family, which is why he talks about the climate. He says we all need to work together to protect our planet, no matter where we come from. Some people think this is very important, but others don't believe it's the Church's job to talk about these issues. In his letter, Laudato Si, the Pope says humans are hurting the planet, especially with how we use fuel. This was very important for people who care about the environment, but some said the Pope should only talk about church stuff, not about the environment. For a Pope that doesn't talk much about science, some of the few things he has said have had a significant impact. For example, many were shocked by the Pope's comments on creation. He said something quite different from what you might expect. He said he didn't believe that God was a magician who made everything instantly. This was surprising because it seemed different from what people thought the Church believed about how the world was created. He also said that believing in evolution and the Big Bang Theory doesn't go against believing in God. This might sound strange, but the Church has been okay with these scientific ideas for a long time. The Pope wanted to tell people that they could believe in both science and God without any problem. Finally, the Pope's thoughts on LGBTQ Catholics. This is one of the most talked about topics in the Church today. Many religious people think LGBTQ lifestyles are wrong and sinful. In 2013, Pope Francis surprised everyone when he said that if someone is gay and wants to follow God, who is he to judge? He said that all people should be treated kindly. He also told Catholics to think more about showing love and kindness rather than just judging people based on what they do or who they love. This idea is really different from what many people in the Church have thought for a long time. It has led to many debates about whether the Church should change its old rules to be more accepting and loving, as Pope Francis suggests. Pope Francis's comments about Jesus' life, which some people find quite different from what they've always been told, are something we need to talk about. These comments might make you see things differently. He said, "We are followers of Jesus Christ, and his life, humanly speaking, ended in failure, the failure of the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? It is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." In his latest speech, Pope Francis highlighted the human aspect of Jesus' life and death, emphasizing the notion of perceived failure. The Pope's assertion that Jesus' life ended in failure, the failure of the cross, invites believers to reflect deeply on the human experience of Jesus, his feelings of abandonment, and the ultimate sacrifice he made. This perspective challenges the traditional view that focuses solely on Jesus' divine nature and triumph over death, urging followers to appreciate the profound humanity and vulnerability Jesus experienced. The Pope's words call for a more empathetic understanding of Jesus' suffering, resonating with those who have faced failure and hardship in their own lives. This approach seeks to make the teachings of Jesus more relatable and accessible, highlighting the shared human condition and the transformative power of empathy and compassion. His comments make people think about the true message of Jesus, which is about loving everyone and being kind. He tries to show that Jesus' life and how he died are important for teaching us to be more understanding and caring, no matter what. This way, Pope Francis is trying to make Jesus' story more relevant for our lives today. While this might be controversial to some, it's part of the Pope's bigger idea of making the Church a place where everyone feels welcome and loved, no matter their situation. Pope Francis's leadership and teachings present a challenge to long-standing doctrines, calling for a reinterpretation of traditional beliefs to align more closely with the principles of empathy and inclusivity. His radical views on Jesus' life, particularly the notion of the failure of the cross, compel believers to reevaluate their understanding of faith, focusing on the profound humanity and vulnerability that Jesus embodied. This shift towards a more compassionate and relatable Christianity, though controversial, has the potential to make the teachings of Jesus more relevant and accessible in the modern world, resonating with those who seek a deeper connection with their faith amidst the complexities of contemporary life.